I 58 male, met my wife, 50 female, at a good friend's Christmas party about 20 years ago. My friend was constantly trying to set me up with people, and when I arrived at the party, he said that he had us both in mind for each other when he was planning our invites. I never liked the idea of matchmaking since it can always make things hard for the mutual friends if things don't work out, especially if they work out and fail later. But she seemed very intelligent, had a great personality, and her smile was beautiful. I left without getting her number, but I really enjoyed conversing with her. So I had my friend send her number to the next day, and that was how we started talking on a regular basis. We started dating, and 5 years later, we got married. We've been married for 15 years now. When I met my wife, Heather, she was a librarian at a small public library, which explained why she was well-versed in so many topics. She's come up quite a long way since then, and she's now the university of librarian for a certain school that I obviously don't want to mention. It's been great watching her ascend the ranks, though. On my side of things, I started a roofing business with two of my brothers, though one has sadly since passed away. However, things have blown up quite significantly, and the business brings in a lot of money. We're more comfortable, and I'm proud of the two of us for how we were able to develop in our respective careers. I earn about 4 times more than she does, but it has never really been an issue since we each make enough money to take care of our own impulse buys. So I think that's enough background. You should be able to understand what I have to say now. My wife has been financially responsible, and she has her own money, but sometimes she has to use my card, especially for household things that I would have paid for anyway. It saves me the stress of having to be there to deal with handymen, contractors, and going for major grocery store hauls. There's been a lot of trust, so I've never really had to go scrutinizing my credit card statement, especially when the general amount that went out each month seems to be in the right ballpark. I mean, I used to scrutinize when money was tighter, and I also realized that it is foolish for me not to happen, but I've learned my lesson. I was considering buying myself a new car, an Audi e-tron GT, since I'm set on getting an electric car, and I tried to see how much I could put down in cash. This had me poring over a lot of my financial documents, and that's when I noticed that there were relatively frequent cash withdrawals. It was usually several hundreds of dollars, usually $500, though on some occasions it was little as $200, and other times as high as $1,000. The thing is, I wasn't familiar with my wife carrying around that much cash, and I always had the impression that she'd get cash from her own bank account. Most of the big things she was supposed to be using my card for could have been paid for with the card and not strictly cash. To be honest, I found myself rather suspicious because it seemed like she was hiding something from me. I don't know why. The first thing that occurred to me was drugs, but that was stupid because I knew for a fact her behavior was too consistent over 15 years of marriage to be hiding a drug habit in there somewhere. You can't get a fix on a 3-day cruise in another country. While I was suspicious, I didn't really have a conclusion. I just knew that those entries on my statement seemed off, and there seemed to be about 2 or 3 of them every month dating back about 2 years. There were some months with nothing, and some with only one withdrawal, but all the others followed the same general pattern. I made the choice to ask her about it when she came back home. I didn't consider it a confrontation because I felt there was going to be some kind of answer that I hadn't considered. Anyway, when we both met at home in the evening, I eventually brought it up. I told her that I noticed regular Catholic trolls of significant amounts, and I was sure they weren't me, so it had to be when she was using my card. The first thing she did was ask if I was sure they weren't mine, and perhaps I had just forgotten or something. I told her I was certain that wasn't the case because it wasn't a single withdrawal. This was happening month after month, and I didn't withdraw that much. I called her over to take a look, and I noticed she dawdled in the kitchen for a bit before she eventually came over. When I pointed out the withdrawals, she looked confused for a second before making a face and saying, I drawled, "Oh, yeah. You know Joanne? You know how she's involved in charity drives and stuff like that? I help her out quite often, and I feel it doesn't help to support her with whatever is available at the time." There was nothing that made me not believe her based on her mannerisms and how confidently she spoke, but it just didn't sound convincing to me. I asked her why she would be taking the money out of my account instead of hers if she wanted to help out her friend, but she claimed it was because I wouldn't feel it as much. I think she realized how stupid that sounded when she said it, so she immediately apologized and said that she'd refund me for all those withdrawals. I told her not to worry, though. The only thing I asked her to do was either tell me ahead of time if she wanted to donate to charity, or simply take it out of her own account. She said she'd do the latter, and that's where we ended the conversation. Here's the thing, though. I was almost sure she was lying based on how silly the explanations sounded. It was true that she had a friend called Joanne who worked for an NGO and was frequently involved with a lot of charity and volunteer work, but I was sure that my wife would have made donations in a way that'd be easier to document than cash deposits. After all, they'd have been tax deductible that way. I knew that something was going on, but I had no idea where to start if I was looking to find out the truth. I felt she had to be giving someone the money because I couldn't figure out what she'd be spending such a variable amounts of money on so regularly. I decided that I'd have to try and see what I could find on her social media accounts, call logs, and messaging apps. Hiring a PI crossed my mind, but that seemed a large jump since I had no actual idea what was going on, and her withdrawals were likely not to come from me anymore now that I had caught her. I simply had to wait for her to give me a chance to access her laptop or her smartphone, and that's the part that'd be hard since she always took her laptop to work with her, and her phone was almost always on her. This is where I realized that I'd need to be patient, and for now, I haven't had a great chance to check either of them. I've had like 5-minute windows, but I don't want a situation where I'll be anxious as I'm checking. I need to know I have several hours to check at my own pace. While I wait for the opportunity, I wonder if you all think it is probable that this has something to do with cheating. I have a little feeling that it might be, but it really doesn't align with what I know about her. I've never seen the slightest sign that she might be cheating on me. To be fair, I might not have been looking well enough, but I find it so hard to reach that conclusion. Let me know if I'm just in denial, or whether there's something I'm not considering. Edit. I've read through every single comment, though there are too many for me to answer. However, the general consensus is that she's somehow cheating on me and spending the money for hotel rooms or something related to her infidelity and doesn't want a paper trail, or she's a junkie. I hate that the former seems like the more likely option because I really think being a drag addict is very hard to hide in its entirety when you live with someone. Is it silly that I'd prefer to her to somehow be a junkie, though? Because at least then I can try to help her through it. I definitely have nothing to stick around for if she's a cheater, though. Update 2. I'm sorry that it's been a while since I put up my initial post about my wife Heather, who I found was regularly withdrawing money from my account, and she claimed it was for charity, but I've doubted her version of events seriously. Fortunately for me, I finally got the opportunity to do some digging toward the truth, and thankfully I was able to find what I was looking for. I was very fortunate that about 2 weeks after my initial post, my wife complained that something was wrong with her laptop. She used as a MacBook, and when she found out, she was late for work. So I volunteered to help her take it to the Apple Store to see if they could get it fixed. That way, she'd potentially come back home to a working laptop, and she knew that if I did this, I'd likely foot the bill. So that was the second perk for her. She agreed, and since she didn't think I was suspicious, she had no reason to think that I'd check her phone or anything. Something actually was up with her laptop, and I had no idea what it was. So I took it to the Apple Store within 30 minutes of her leaving for work. Fortunately for me, it apparently wasn't too big of an issue, and the guys were able to get it fixed for me relatively quickly. I basically had the rest of the day with her laptop. I knew her password, so that wasn't a problem. When I got back home, I got right to work. I checked her messages first, but I didn't see anything that seemed to be of note. I headed up her social media after that, and since I knew that she used Facebook the most, that was the first place that I went to. Thankfully for me, it was logged in on her computer as I expected it to be, and I went straight to the messages. I could recognize some of the people there, but there was one name in the more recent entries that was very unfamiliar to me, and it was Brent Hawthorne, not his real name. For some reason, I decided to open his profile before reading the messages, and I saw that he was a student at the same school that my wife worked at. That was when I decided to jump into their conversation. To be honest, I really don't want to go over everything that I had read, but I'll do my best to summarize it. Most of the messages were from this Brent character and not from my wife, and there was a lot of, "I'd love to see you this week," and some more steamy messages like him saying how much he missed her or craved her. Then, there were some messages where he seemed to be asking for help with certain obligations like his car, his rent, or fulfilling certain obligations as a student. Had they responded to most of his messages sparingly, but the fact that it went on for so long made it clear that she was somehow engaging with him, likely in person. There were no nudes, and neither could I see any explicit back and forth texting, But it was clear that this student wasn't messaging her the way one might message a professor or something. There was something grossly inappropriate going on, and it didn't require a genius to see that. My wife's messages were basic, like I said, and if I was to go off those alone, I wouldn't have had much to hold against her, but it was so clear that she was somehow encouraging him in a way that wasn't in the message thread. It was at this point that it occurred to me that my wife was this guy's sugar mommy. There was no other way to explain that many cash withdrawals and all those requests he was making. I decided to take pictures of as much of the chat as I could, and later I compared it with the credit card statement. I could see that several of the cash withdrawals came a day or two after this guy would complain about needing money for one thing or the other. The worst part of the entire situation was this woman was choosing to use my money to fund her sugar baby, for who knows what reason. She'd never been caught if she was using her own money, but it seemed she was being tight-fisted. I was pissed off at the entire situation. In fact, I was pissed enough that I hired a PI to do his best to trail her. I was also able to give him images that I pulled from the Brent's guy's Facebook page, so he'd know who to look out for. I'm going to fast forward here, but the PI was able to get images of them heading out to the library together around closing hours, and they both got into her car. I wasn't fortunate enough to see pictures of them kissing or anything like that, but there was a lot of physical contact between the two of them in the images I got. I was sure that level of contact was enough to jeopardize her job considering Brent is a student of the school. I'm armed with this now, and I'm ready to end things. There's nothing else to be had after 15 years of marriage. She's looking for young blood to make her feel young again. I can certainly make it through the rest of my life without having to worry about being cheated on, so I'm ready to end things with her. I'll let you all know how that goes, but it might be a while before then. Update 3. It's been a while, but here's my final update when it comes to my wife, Heather, the librarian, who I found out seems to be sleeping with one of the students in the school she works at. I don't have solid evidence that they've slept together, but it was the easy conclusion to make based on all the evidence that I was able to get access to. I got in contact with the divorce lawyer and stated my entire case to him, presenting all the evidence that I managed to gather by myself. The lawyer was impressed, and he said that we'd have a pretty easy time in court if the judge was convinced that her cash withdrawals could be directly linked to his requests in the Facebook messages. It'd be clear that she was using my money and not hers, a very calculated decision. She committed adultery, and that would help my case quite significantly. I wanted to walk into the library and serve the divorce papers myself, but I was told that I wouldn't be able to do that in my case, so I had to leave it to a process server. I wish I could have gotten the satisfaction from being there when it happened. I did get some satisfaction when she called me about 5 times in a row, and I only picked up the 5th time. The first thing she did was ask if it was some kind of sick joke, but I told her it wasn't. She asked me what she did wrong and why we didn't talk about it if it was that bad, but I told her that talking about it wouldn't have fixed anything since it was unforgivable. She had no idea what I knew, so she kept talking rather aggressively and trying to make me out to be some kind of idiot, but I simply told her that we'd talk about it when we're at home and I hung up. When she got back home, she looked like she needed sleep. I assumed she must have spent the entire day overthinking. She sat down a lot calmer than she sounded on the phone and asked me if I was serious. Why not it? And she asked me what she did that made me ask for a divorce. I didn't waste time and I told her that she was sleeping with one of the students at the university. She froze and I swear I watched her go pale in an instant. What are you talking about? I didn't even bother saying anything. I just smirked and shook my head. She buried her head in her hands after that. She must have thought there was a chance that she could call my bluff, but there was no bluff. She knew I knew. The fact that she used my money on Brent is the most disgusting part of it all. She couldn't even keep me out of your infidelity with someone who was young enough to be your son. She started sobbing at this point, but it didn't move me. 15 years wasted on you. I sat there looking at her as she continued to cry until she looked up and trying to choke out an apology, but nothing came. I told her that I was giving her 3 hours to pack up the things that she needs and to get out of the house. She started crying this time audibly, and it was pissing me off, so I stepped up out of the house and sat on the patio. Honestly, it was the very bittersweet moment because I knew how much I loved this woman, how much I was going to miss her, but I could not satisfy my integrity by sleeping with a cheater. In about 2 hours, I went back into the house and found her bags packed. Within 10 minutes, I had called an Uber for her and shooed her out of the house. I felt at peace when I was there alone, But there was a lot of pain that I was housing because I knew of her for way too long for things to not to hurt. Eventually, we got into the actual divorce phase, and while that part threatened to be long and annoying, it seemed like she actually wasn't too vindictive. She realized how largely she had messed up, and she went through the entire divorce thing like she had been sapped of energy. She rarely put up a fight, and that was incredibly satisfying. The first thing was that she was instructed to pay me back all the money that she had used on her affair trips. It was assured to be every single cash withdrawal there. The second best thing was that I got out of having to pay alimony, because what's the point of doing that when the assumption is that she'll just use it to fuel the same type of bad decision that got her into this position in the first place? The judge was sympathetic. The house was an easy win for me too. In fact, the only thing she was actually able to take were some things in the house that she was going to need for her new place, like a TV, a mattress, and a bed frame, a refrigerator, and her car. Apart from that, there was nothing else major that she took out of that house, and it made me incredibly happy. I didn't want her to win in any significant fashion. The divorce was over, and she came to me right as we were leaving. She held both my hands in hers and apologized, rather genuine seeming, for the way she betrayed my trust. I accepted it, but the truth is, I wasn't done. I had one last thing to do, and then I'd forgive her. I sent the images of her and the student, as well as certain excerpts of the messages, to the university's management. I knew for a fact that it did not permit such relationships on campus due to the uneven power dynamic it came with. There was nothing too crazy, but it was clearly an inappropriate relationship. I wish I had stronger evidence. She was suspended without pay for 3 months as a result. She was still making payments to me, and it seemed she had to sell her car, according to mutual friends, to be able to keep her finances afloat. At that point, it seemed to make sense that she had somehow been financially stupid, which would explain why she was turning towards my account to fund her sugar baby. I don't know exactly how, because I had always assumed she'd have enough money to survive for a year unemployed, but clearly not. I had hoped she'd have been kicked out of the job, but they felt like the evidence showed more wrongdoing on the part of the student, though she was also deemed not to have been assertive at all towards setting boundaries. It still felt good, though, because she knew it was me behind all of it, and that alone was immensely satisfying to me. Her apology meant nothing to me, because she cheated multiple times and knew it was wrong. A sorry doesn't fix all of that in seconds. I hope she learned that the hardest way I could have shown her